Aloha everyone and welcome to another Tinker's Academy video. I'm your host Kay Elmer, and in this video I'd like to talk to you about why you need vitamin D. No, really, because I know you've watched lots of different vitamin videos, and of course you know that every vitamin is important to you and all the minerals and all that stuff, but this is not that video. Basically, what I wanted to share with you is some news that's coming up, some studies that have been done about the effect of vitamin D on the news, and also, really kind of just taking a look at some of the myths, like, what's the deal with vitamin D and vitamin K, and do you really need both? Is sunlight better than oral supplementation and that sort of thing? So I did some research, wanted to share it with you, especially in light of the times. And, why don't you join me and maybe I can help you learn something and this will be educational for you. And so let's jump right in. So, of course, there's that disclaimer. The video content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider in any questions you have regarding medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have read or seen in this video or on the Tinker's Academy website. The Tinker's Academy hereby disclaims any and all liability to any party for any direct, indirect, implied, punitive, special, incidental, or other consequential damages arising directly or indirectly from any use of the video content and associated blog post, which is provided as is and without warranty. All right, there you go. I wanted to just don't sue me. Bottom line, though, is, if you just find stuff on the internet and YouTube and things like that, I encourage everyone to do their own research. I try to provide as much research to you to help you make the right decisions for you and your family. Also, too, another just FYI, all of the information held in this video is available via links in the video description below, including products, research, etc., etc. So there you go. Let's jump right in. Now, first things first, I'm just going to real quick, you can just pause the video if you want to read the slide, but bottom line is, depending on what you read, the vitamin D deficiency in the general population for Caucasians is anywhere from 36 to 42%. So there are a buttload of us that are vitamin D deficient and most likely deficient in everything else as well. So that's no surprise, right? But the thing that's interesting that when I did the research on this was that Hispanics are 63% on average when they do these statistical analyses, and even more so African Americans are 82% deficient in vitamin D. So it's kind of a pronounced problem, you can definitely see, and it's even more interesting as the darker your skin is that you'd actually have more problems with vitamin D. So I thought that was really interesting, and obviously there's a lot of associated problems with vitamin D, and you can go ahead and just take a peek at this thing. But one of the interesting things here is that there are a lot of things that can go wrong if you don't have enough vitamin D, which of course goes along with everything else that you could be deficient in. So bottom line, vitamin D deficiency, bad. Okay? But here's the news that I wanted to share with you. And this is the thing. Unless you're living under a rock, and most of you are not, bottom line is, if you've been paying attention to the news, then you know that this is coming up and it's becoming more and more and more pronounced in media, in the mainstream media, about the fact that, COVID is making a comeback. So let me just share with you. This is from the Today NBC News. Literally 1 week ago today. Today is September 12th, Tuesday, 2023, and now, honestly, everywhere I look, YouTube, I don't really watch television, but all the ads that I'm seeing on all the different streaming services that I have are now really, really pumping, the fact that COVID's making a rise. And of course, they just recently, FDA just approved a new booster. So, it's like it's really, really ramping up. And so I just wanted to share it with you so you kind of get an idea of what's really going on.
Concert and sports arenas, even daytime TV. A reminder that COVID-19 has not gone away. As health experts say, a late summer wave of cases is now leading to an uptick in hospitalizations, though still well below pandemic peaks.
We haven't reached a predictable pattern with the virus. That's why we have to care. And we're seeing incredible mutations and changes in the virus.
Among those...
Boy, where have you heard that before? So, at the end of the day, when we take a look at what happened during the pandemic, I think it's safe to say that people were getting sick. We know that the PCR tests were flawed. So you were either getting a cold, the flu, or COVID itself, but there really was an actual COVID because of all the people I know and all the different, I really just, what do we do for 2 years other than being locked down and just really pay attention to this stuff? But at the end of the day, people were getting sick. And so the people who actually got COVID were just sick as hell, couldn't smell, just out for 2 weeks, down. I mean, down hard. And then a lot of them have long COVID where they're still not well. And then there's other people out there who just got the flu. And, I knew people that, basically tested positive and got a 2-week vacation with a little bit of sniffles. So, the whole idea, though, is that there's a regular flu that goes around, even as much as the media wants to pretend that the flu went away during pandemic, which is complete BS, right? The flu just doesn't disappear after 200 years. So bottom line, though, is, but, let's just, for the sake of argument, people are getting sick, and you're either getting really, really sick or mildly sick, but either way, you're getting sick. And now with this thing coming back, and they're really starting to pump it out, then obviously we're also entering into winter. So here's the thing that I wanted to point out specifically to COVID, because they're making a big deal about it coming back, and as of course you remember, it being something that was a bioweapon that got out of a lab or released from a lab, depends on who you talk to. But at the end of the day, though, if this is coming back and we're going to see another release and or seasonal flu and all that stuff, then this is what really is interesting about that particular thing. So, and the thing that we're really most concerned about, and what I'm kind of keeping an eye on, is, hey, you know what, if something else gets released again and they want to ramp it up because, coincidentally, it is an election year next year, bottom line is that, in the early days of the pandemic, they did a study, and there's a study published in the NCBI, scientific literature, that basically was saying, hey, they took a look in the early days of the pandemic. They were looking, and okay, let's just ignore that whole PCR thing being wrong, and who knows what they really had. But at the end of the day, they basically said, hey, 180 out of 185 people that were hospitalized, being sick with the the typical symptoms of flu/COVID. Bottom line, though, they took a look at that, and they found out that out of 185 people, it showed statistically a clear inverse relationship between the magnitude of the disease and the levels of vitamin D on admission. Okay, so out of these, the 50% who were hospitalized, showed characteristic vitamin D deficiency. Now, okay, so let's say 185 people get sick, and end up in the hospital because they're sick. And then we know that 36 to 42% are vitamin D deficient anyway, and they find out that 50% of the people that ended up in the hospital are vitamin D deficient. Well, honestly, unless they split that out by race, that just means that it's just the typical population. All right. So, right. I mean, statistically, it's the same damn number almost. So really, did vitamin D really make a difference between the severity of the disease? By the way, we're not talking about getting it or not. We're talking about severity. Okay. This is what the study focused in on. So the whole idea, though, is that, the scientists were like, is it really causation or preventative? And the numbers really weren't there. And so the whole idea there, they were looking at, in the beginning, the science was looking at the ability for vitamin D to counteract, the actual catching of the disease. And they were looking at it as a possible treatment. So then what was interesting, though, and I want to point out another study that was published in PubMed called Vitamin D Insufficiency May Account for Almost 9 of 10 COVID-19 deaths. Okay, so this was later on in the year in 2020 where they started looking at people who were, they were claiming had died of COVID. And again, if you've been paying attention during the pandemic, there's a lot of BS in those numbers, and so it's really hard to kind of make sense of it. But if you just step back and say, okay, irregardless of what the PCR test, who cares what you labeled their illness? Let's just say they got sick and they ended up in the hospital, and no real change there. The same kind of rough percentages, unless, of course, again, unless you really break it out by race, you really don't know if that 50%, were vitamin D deficient because they, was it because they were sick? Who knows, right? Because it isn't substantial. However, they later on did another study, and it was a study of studies, where they actually said, hey, let's look at all the people that are claimed to have died, or died with a claim, right, to COVID. And again, just people that are sick. People that are sick and died that year. When they took a look at it, I think this is where it really stands out as a causation. And basically they said, of this study, where they found out that almost 9 out of 10 people died. So bottom line, there was evidence from observational studies and accumulating, right? This was during the pandemic. They were a year into it. But bottom line, they really started taking a look at the studies, and that they've discovered that the majority of deaths due to SARS-CoV infections, i.e. they were sick, were statistically attributable to vitamin D insufficiency and could potentially be prevented by vitamin D supplementation. So at this point, a year into the pandemic, doctors or scientists and all those guys started realizing that, hey, vitamin D is playing a significant role, not only in the severity of the conditions, but also now is really affecting the deaths of people who, quote, got sick of something, right? But then this is what's most important. This is really what I wanted to convey. One of the key points in this video is that, hey, this study, available on PubMed, links below in the video description. You can read the study yourself. Bottom line is that when translated to the proportion of deaths in the population that is statistically attributable to vitamin D insufficiency, a key measure of public health relevance of risk factors, these results imply that 87% of people who got sick died, deaths, right, may be statistically attributed to vitamin D insufficiency and could potentially be avoided by eliminating vitamin D insufficiency. Okay, so what does that mean? Seriously, getting sick, whether it's the flu or whatever they want to name it this year, right? Bottom line is, hey, you know what? The majority, 9 out of 10 people who ended up dying from being sick, right? Call it what you want, were vitamin D deficient. I think that is a significant piece of information. Take that bullet, put it in a pin, and then say, hey, well, wait a minute then. Okay, it does actually make an effect. I mean, it has an effect. Okay, so now that's what I really wanted to convey. So when it comes to why do you need vitamin D? Well, hey, this is a hell of a reason. We're getting into winter now. It's fall. We're into flu season, and now we're going to be coming up to COVID season. And I realize that a lot of you still have your wildfire decorations up, but now we need to put up our COVID decorations. But here we go. We're entering a new season, and vitamin D is a big deal with it, according to the studies of the studies. Okay, so this is real factual information, not the propaganda or that other stuff. So now let's take a look at some of the myths behind vitamin D. So hey, one of the first questions I want to know was, well, I take supplementation for vitamin D, and I'm also, I also try to spend as much time as I can outdoors getting sunlight. The two ways you can get vitamin D is your body can produce it when you're out in the sun, right? Or you can take its supplements. But one of the questions that I came up with is like, well, which is better? Is there really any difference between getting sunlight and taking oral supplementation? And then, of course, you got this whole thing in the winter where you're not really going to get a lot of sunlight because you're wearing so much clothes. And at the same time, we have a society now that is sort of wrapped around their smart devices, and they don't get any sun normally, so there's not a lot of people that work outside, because we're a service industry, we're typically working indoors, the majority of us. So, hey, which one's better, taking a supplement or going and getting sunlight? And here's an interesting study that came from the NCBI. The title of the study is Effective Sun Exposure versus oral vitamin D supplementation on, vitamin D3 levels in young adults. And so the interesting thing about this study was they've discovered that there's really no difference. Okay, so that means that both are good. And so there was an 8-week randomized placebo-controlled clinical trial that they did in Korea, which is, they did in Seoul, Korea. And now Seoul, Korea is at 37 north latitude. So, it's the same point. Literally, I think the United States, the continental United States, is the lower 48, right? So it's anywhere from like 30 degrees north latitude to 48 degrees north latitude. So Seoul would be like literally the middle of our country in terms of where it is on the planet. So it's the same place, same amount of sunlight, 8-week controlled randomized study, and they did a study, and they discovered, and this is what's interesting though, they discovered that sun exposure and oral vitamin D3 effectively increased. So that was bottom line. The bottom line is that, hey, there's really no difference between the two. However, what was interesting in the results of this study was they discovered that the ones that had taken oral supplementation actually had higher vitamin D, but then when they actually got into the details of the people who were participating in this study, they found out that compliance with sun exposure was relatively low. In other words, the people who were told to go get X amount of sunlight just didn't get around to doing it, and that's when they discovered, oh, that's why it's lower. So at the end of the day, the study comes out and says, hey, you know what? They're pretty much the same. So the answer to this problem is, bottom line is, you can either take oral supplements or get sunlight, or both, right? If you really want to make sure that your levels are high. So now, one of the things. So let's take a look at oral supplementation. So the issue about oral supplementation is that there's always been this thing about, when you talk to the people that know this stuff and they say, oh, you have to take vitamin K, and especially, and just another thing too, there's vitamin D, there's vitamin K. And the ones that's recommended in these studies is a particular form of vitamin D called D3 and a particular form of vitamin K called K2, right? So let's stick to D3, K2 from this point forward. So here's what's interesting. And I went looking around the internet for information about, hey, what's the relationship between the two? And there's lots of really good studies about it. And it really kind of summarizes down to the reason that those two are always kind of bundled together, and that you can't just think about, I need to take vitamin D or D3, I need to be taking K. And so why is that? So really it's kind of very, very simple. Is that here's the deal. In the absence of vitamin K2, calcium circulating in the body that has been absorbed from food by vitamin D is also deposited in the soft tissues of the body and in the arteries, leading to arteriosclerosis. Okay, so vitamin D3 should therefore always be taken in combination with vitamin K2. So what does that mean? Well, it's interesting because vitamin D and K, these are all like, they're basically like hormones, right? And so they basically trigger your body, and it has a lot to do with calcium. So what vitamin D does, and it's one of its things that it does, right, is it deposits the calcium you're taking, and it puts it into your soft tissues and your arteries. Now that's fine if you don't overdo it. Your body will regulate itself. However, if you end up taking too much, or it accumulates too much in you, then that's problematic because you don't want to calcify your arteries. Clear, that's common sense. And so what K2 does the opposite, and that's what K2, vitamin K, comes in and says, oh no, it takes the calcium out of your soft tissues and puts it into your bones. And that's why those two come together. They balance each other out, so that overdoing on either one or just keeping it all in balance so that you don't have too much calcium in your soft tissues, and it always ends up where it needs to end up. And so that's really what it comes down to. So I found this really great article on a website called Vitamin Express. And in here, when it talks about dosage, it's real interesting because that's one of the clear things I was trying to figure out in my research was, what is the proper dosage of these two things? It's clear you need to take it. You need this, right? Especially if you want to avoid the big C. And so how much should you take? And so now the literature is a little bit, literature's rule all over the map. But bottom line is this article really kind of gets into the whole, well, if this is your level of health, or if you have these health problems, then you should take this much, if not that much, if not. And so it really kind of broke it down to, hey, there's a range, so nothing's like, black and white. So vitamin D3, people, this is the recommended dosage, according to the science, based on your health. So it really depends on your health. You might want to take, take a read at this article to kind of get an idea of like, where do you stand? But the range is anywhere from 2,500 to 5,000 IU per day for vitamin D3, and the range for vitamin K2 is 45 to 200 micrograms per day. Okay, so that's really what people should be taking. And of course, now taking oral supplementation depends on how much sunlight. If you get constant sunlight and your body's producing it, as was the study in Seoul, South Korea, then you can completely be fine just off of sunlight. But if you don't get a lot of sunlight or no sunlight, then you're going to need oral, right? So it's kind of like this balance between the two, or you do the two together. If you do the two together, then you don't have to worry about getting too much of either one. That's the whole point about the balancing. So I spent some time on Amazon. I did my thing, the best price, highest review, and also trying to figure out, okay, how do these numbers match up? So I did find two specific supplements that were the best price for their dosage amount per capsule. And the thing about it, right, this is the low end. So if this one from Now vitamins, basically for the D3K2 complex, it's really kind of really inexpensive, but it's 1,000 IU and 45 mcg of vitamin K2. All right, so this would be the low end of the scale, and then of course the high end of the scale would be 5,000 IU and 200 micrograms. And so you kind of got, this is the scale right here, and this is the price difference because you're obviously getting more. But if you wanted to save some time, take a shortcut, then links in the video description below. I did the homework research for you. So that's kind of how that works out. And then of course, again, guys, it's September, winter's coming, they're ramping up COVID. Please, just help yourself, help your loved ones, and make sure that you are covered. Okay. And that's my recommendation. And by the way, I do this as well. Now, talk about sunlight. Okay, so here's the thing about sunlight, and it's not about the actual, like, it's not the specific idea of the, well, it is biophotons coming from the sun, but it's specifically the UV radiation, UVB and UVA radiation that's actually driving the melanin production in your epidermal layer of your skin that produces the vitamin D. So, for me, I was like, okay, well, if we know that which is better and they're both the same, and then, okay, well, and then during the winter, I definitely want to take supplementation because I'm not getting as much sunlight. But also, too, just what I do, and if I just wanted to kind of make this recommendation, is that I also continue to get sunlight, sunlight in quotes, through the winter. I use a vitamin D lamp. And so, here is a study from NCBI, on the effect of ultraviolet radiation from a portable fluorescent lamp. Okay, so in other words, in the absence of sunlight, how do you keep getting, how do you produce vitamin D naturally? Because for me, at the end of the day, I want to try to do everything I can as naturally as possible and not do synthetic stimulation as much as I can. But bottom line, though, is this is why I think that it's really important to continue to get that ultraviolet radiation throughout the winter. So, if I'm from Hawaii, and so I never bothered with this. It was always sunny, and so I didn't really think about it until I moved to the mainland. And when I got here, I'm like, you know what? I really want to make sure that I continue to get biophotons and sunlight throughout the winter months when I'm not being able to go outside very much or not be able to have sun exposure. So I bought one of these lamps when I got here a couple of years ago, and I use it regularly throughout the winter. And I'll tell you, it really did, for me personally, this is my experiences, it really made I think it made a positive difference in terms of just getting through the winter. I was taking oral supplementation of vitamin DK2 as well as getting the UVB and UVA light. To continue to have my body produce, the melanin and producing D3. So the interesting thing about this study, though, is that it proves that using this lamp, this very specific lamp, which was what was chosen to be used in the study, discovered that, when you use this lamp, okay, the study was, I believe it was 7 individuals. It was actually a placebo-controlled study. So they did human tissue, they did 7 human beings, and then they did a group of people who did not use the lamp. And they discovered that across the board, the ones with the lamp and also the human tissue in the lab controlled were actually, had risen in D3. So it works, okay? And what was interesting is you don't have to do it a lot. I mean, the control study of the humans that were doing it were 3 times a week. Okay. And then if you read, I own this thing. So the instructions are you start out at 3 minutes each side. So you kind of flip yourself like a hamburger, you just, and face it and then flip over, but it was 3 minutes each side. Right. And then you grow up to 5 minutes and you do it every other day. And that's what I do throughout the winter. And it's just really quick. I get out of the shower, boom, I stand in front of it, put your goggles on. You got to make sure you have goggles on because it is UV light. But at the end of the day, this thing worked really, really well. It traveled really well too, because I ordered it when I was in Hawaii, not thinking, crap, I need now I gotta go to the mainland. So I shipped, it was shipped to me in Hawaii, and I shipped it to myself here in Missouri. It traveled both ways just fine. Nothing broke. It was, it was a really sturdy little piece of equipment. And so, yeah, it's basically on and off switch and a timer. And then you just kind of flip back and forth, wear your goggles 3 times a week, and you're good. And so the other thing that's really important about this lamp that I had to kind of figure out, which was, I also use a red light lamp, but with a UV lamp, this study indicated that, the people that did it and actually showed that they, by using it, they only exposed 9% of their body. 9% of their body to the light, because I was always kind of trying to figure out position of the lamp where you stand and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, basically if you're just shirtless, stand in front of it where it just hits you the trunk of your body, that's good, and you're good. So it's really quite simple to use. And I think the most important thing to me is you're asking, well, hey, if I can get vitamin D through supplements, why would I want to do, and go out and get a vitamin D lamp? And so the last thing I want to share with you is my research that I went through to kind of make that decision for myself, and saying, well, hey, again, it's a lot more expensive than taking supplements. But here's the thing that's real interesting about the benefits of UV radiation over other vitamin D production. Okay, so while we know that because of the study in Seoul, Korea, that you can get it either way, so that there's really not much difference. But here's the thing: if you take it in by light, if you produce vitamin D with light, okay, UVA, UVB. Using this lamp or stand out in the sun, throughout the year, except for winter, then, hey, there's a lot of other benefits. And so I'm kind of a biohacker, as you know, really into the whole longevity, anti-aging, biohacking thing. And so, you know what? When I did the research on this, I'm like, that's why I ended up buying it, was not just because of the vitamin D, but because the lamp in this, and of course, sunlight. Sunlight's free. Go out there and enjoy all the free sunlight you can get. And when you don't get as much, then think about this. The vitamin D lamp does more for you than just produce vitamin D. And I think one of the interesting thing was that, there's some simple things here. I mean, there's some simple, smart stuff, but over the summer, you're getting light and it increases melanin, and that, of course, gives you your tan, and tan acts like sunscreen. Okay. So that's obviously clear. Basically you're in a tanning salon. You got your own little tanning salon at home using this lamp, and your skin stays relatively tanned. And then that protects you from sunlight, but, not an issue in winter, obviously. However, too, though, the thing about it, though, is that this has been shown as an effective treatment for skin diseases like psoriasis, vitiligo, atopic dermatitis, and localized scleroderma. Okay, now I also have eczema, and my eczema gone, and since I started doing this whole sunlight therapy years ago. So I don't, so I think it really helps if you have a skin condition. That's another perk for using a vitamin D lamp instead of and or with supplementation. And also too, the idea here is that UV exposure can suppress clinical symptoms of multiple sclerosis. Didn't know that until I did the research. But here's the thing about the biohacking stuff. This was huge. When I found this out, boom, I ordered the vitamin D lamp. That UV generates nitric oxide, which may reduce blood pressure and generally improve cardiovascular health. UVA nitric oxide may also have an antimicrobial effects and furthermore acts as a neurotransmitter. Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, well, also too, I just want to say UV exposure may improve mood through the release of endorphins. And so what this comes down to is that, if you're out there trying to make sure you get enough vitamin D, and you either can take supplements, right, or stand under a lamp or sunlight, or both. And I'm the person that chose both because I really want to make sure that I keep it at a really high level, which, by the way, I haven't had a sick day at work for over, 6-7 years now. And so I really maintain those levels as high as I can. I take vitamin K with the D3 so that it balances out. I don't have any calcium buildup in my soft tissues. But the thing about it too, by using the lamp throughout the winter, okay, it's really the biophotons of it is a really, really, really beneficial thing. I mean, I originally grew up in Alaska, and cabin fever is a real big deal up there, and there's a really high alcoholism rate, a lot of drug usage in dark, cold climates because there's not a lot else to do, and so people get a little depressed. That's what's called cabin fever, and so, this light really, really makes a big difference towards that. It really, getting that light, it produces endorphins. But then going back to this right here, nitric oxide is one of the top 5 anti-aging focuses that, in all the research I've done on biohacking. I mean, it's like one of the holy grail things to do. And there's this big thing, and if you look it up, about taking NNM, which is nicotinamide mononucleotide. It's just this big thing. The anti-aging biohacking guys are all about NNM because what is so big about NNM? It creates nitric oxide. It helps your body produce more nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a huge thing when it comes to longevity and anti-aging and your health. And so what's most interesting, this is really the most interesting thing that popped out of my research when I was doing this was like, whoa, this light does that? Because, I take N&M, but I'm like, okay, well, now I know that the lamp and sunlight is also anti-aging. So here, it's just another plus that, I wanted to share with you. I learn, I share, I communicate, and I just really wanted to put all this together and share it with you today. So, hey, man, I really want to say thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something. Hope this was educational. The big C wave is coming at us. Winter's coming. Make sure you keep your vitamin D levels up. Take K with it, and consider getting more sunlight. And if you can't, get a lamp if you're stuck indoors all the time. And stay healthy, okay? Don't let them get you. So thanks for watching. Really appreciate your time. If you want to reach out and learn more about what I do, it's all about health and healing in a multitude of different ways. You can just type in tinkers.academy in your URL window, and it pops you right over to my blog. Again, and if you enjoy the content and you find it valuable, thank you. And please like and subscribe, and I will continue to put out a lot more content, and I have put out a lot of content on this type of topics, and that's my thing. I really enjoy helping people, and I really am adamant about not letting the owl pass get me and trying to stay as healthy as I can. Be your own healer. All right, guys? So thank you very much. Have a great day. I hope this was helpful. Aloha.